Hey there, language lovers and knowledge seekers. Buckle up, because we're diving deep into the mind of Noam Chomsky and his book, Rules and Representations.
It's really a game changer, It pushes you to rethink what it means to know something.
I mean, it's not just about language, right?
Right. It's about how we come to understand anything at all.
It's like he's cracked the code of human knowledge.
In a way, yeah. And in this book, he really zooms in on language. Like, what does it even mean to know a language?
Yeah. Is it just being able to speak and understand? Or is there something more going on in our brains?
Deeper, yeah. And how do we go from, babbling babies to mastering grammar?
Right. It's mind-blowing when you think about it.
And Chomsky, he proposes this really interesting approach to studying the mind. He calls it the Galilean approach.
Hold on, Galilean. Galileo Galilei.
But yeah.
The telescope guy.
Exactly. It's inspired by how physicists study the universe.
Okay, so how does that apply to our brains?
Think about it. Physicists study these massive, complex systems.
Yeah, the universe is pretty big.
Right. So they create models, stripping away unnecessary details to focus on core principles.
So we need to simplify to understand.
Exactly. It's about abstraction. Chomsky believes this approach can unlock the secrets of the mind, too.
So instead of getting lost in every little quirk of language, we look for the underlying rules that govern it.
Exactly. And he basically says to anyone who disagrees, prove me wrong.
Throws down the gauntlet. I love it.
And to illustrate this, he uses this thought experiment about a Spanish pill.
A Spanish pill, like you swallow it and boom, you're fluent.
Yeah. Imagine that. If knowledge is just experience, then that pill shouldn't work.
Right. But it makes you wonder, what does it mean to know something?
Exactly. It challenges the idea that knowledge is solely from experience.
Makes you think. And typically we judge someone's language ability by their behavior, right?
Right, like if you can speak it, you know it.
But Chomsky says there's more to it than that. He says knowing a language is a specific mental state.
It's a particular configuration of what he calls the language faculty.
The language faculty.
It's like a dedicated system in our brains for language.
So it's not just about the words we say, but the mental structure that allows us to use those words.
Precisely. To study this, Chomsky uses native speaker judgments or intuitions.
Intuitions. Like gut feelings about grammar.
Basically, linguists ask native speakers to judge if sentences sound right or wrong, even if they can't explain why.
Like the cat sat on the mat. Sounds good, but Matt the sat cat on the sounds totally off.
Exactly. These judgments help reveal the hidden rules of language, and this leads to one of Chomsky's most famous arguments, the poverty of the stimulus argument.
Poverty of the stimulus. Sounds intense.
It is. It basically points out this fascinating paradox.
A paradox. What is it?
Kids learn complex grammar even though they're exposed to limited language data.
So there's a gap between what they hear and what they end up knowing.
Huge gap. And Chomsky uses reciprocal expressions as an example, like each other.
Each other, okay.
Kids rarely hear complex sentences with each other, but somehow they figure out the rules.
It's like they're learning things they were never explicitly taught.
Exactly. So how do they do it?
Well, Chomsky's answer is pretty radical, right? He says we're born with it.
Kind of, yeah. He proposes this idea of universal grammar. It's like a blueprint for language.
A blueprint. So we come pre-wired for language.
In a way, yeah. This blueprint has these adjustable settings called parameters, and those settings get tweaked based on the language a child hears.
So the blueprint is innate, but the final language depends on experience.
Exactly. It explains how kids can learn such complex grammar from limited data. It's not all from scratch.
It's building on a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of innate structures, it leads to another big idea, modularity of the mind.
Modularity, yeah. It's like our minds are made up of different systems, each with a specific job.
Like building blocks.
Sort of, yeah. Instead of one big mushy brain, we have these specialized modules for different functions.
So language is separate from, say, our ability to understand concepts or use language in social situations.
Exactly. And there's research to support this. Studies on people who had left hemisphere removals as infants, they can still communicate.
Wow, even with damaged language areas.
Yeah. It suggests other brain regions can compensate.
The brain is amazing. But let's be real, not every theory is perfect.
Of course. There are challenges to Chomsky's ideas.
What kind of challenges?
Well, one is this idea called the museum myth. Critics say Chomsky's view of language is too static.
Like it's frozen in time.
Right. They argue that language is constantly evolving.
It's a living thing, constantly changing.
Exactly. But Chomsky's theory doesn't completely deny this.
So how does he address this?
He argues that his theory focuses on the underlying principles that allow language to change and evolve.
It's like understanding the rules of the game, not just the specific moves in a match.
Perfect analogy. Another challenge is this idea of indeterminacy.
Indeterminacy, okay. What's that about?
Some argue that language is too ambiguous to have a fixed set of rules.
Because we can't directly see how the language faculty works.
Right.
We're just observing the output.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean searching for underlying principles is pointless.
Right. We can still develop theories based on what we observe, even if we can't see the inner workings.
It's like studying black holes. We can't see them directly, but we can observe their effects on surrounding matter.
So we infer their existence based on the evidence.
Precisely. And Chomsky often points out that his critics are demanding impossible levels of certainty.
Like they want proof beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Right, which isn't realistic in AA science, especially when studying something as complex as the mind.
It's about building the best explanation we can with the evidence we have. And this brings us to applications, right?
Right.
How do Chomsky's ideas play out in the real world?
Oh, huge impact, especially in language education.
Oh, yeah. How so?
His emphasis on innate structures really challenged traditional teaching methods.
Interesting. What kind of changes did it lead to?
It led to new methods that focus on nurturing children's natural language abilities, rather than drilling grammar rules.
So instead of treating kids like empty vessels, we recognize they come pre-wired for language.
Exactly. It's about creating environments where they can flourish. This shift has influenced speech therapy and even AI.
AI. That makes sense. If we want to build machines that can understand human language, we need to understand how humans do it.
Right. Absolutely. Chomsky's work provides a framework for grasping language's complexity, essential for building AI that can truly communicate.
So, although there are challenges, Chomsky's work has had a massive impact on how we understand language and the mind. But you mentioned he sees language as a derivative concept. What does he mean by that?
This gets a little philosophical, but basically he argues that fixating on language, as we typically understand it, might be too narrow.
Narrow.
Yeah. He says we should be studying the underlying cognitive systems that make language possible.
So instead of focusing on the surface, we need to look deeper.
Exactly. He believes understanding these deeper systems will unlock a much richer understanding of the human mind.
It's like studying the surface of a lake versus understanding the geology that shapes it.
Perfect analogy. So, language becomes a window into the mind, a way to decode human thought.
Whoa, that deep. And it brings up a really interesting question. If language relies on innate structures, what about other types of knowledge? Could those have blueprints too?
Like a universal grammar for music or math or even social understanding.
Exactly.
That's the big question, right? Like, does this idea of innate structures go beyond language?
Yeah, does it apply to other things we learn? I mean, kids seem to pick up language without even trying.
Exactly. It seems effortless. But then you think about something like advanced calculus.
Totally different story.
Right. Maybe it's because we have this head start with language, like we're born with a guidebook.
So maybe our brains are just better suited for certain types of knowledge.
It's possible. And if that's true, it totally changes how we think about learning and teaching.
Yeah.
Like, should we be tailoring our methods to these innate abilities?
Yeah, instead of forcing everyone into the same box.
Exactly. Chomsky argues that we need to create environments that nurture these natural predispositions.
Yeah.
Like, think about how young kids learn language. It's all about immersion and interaction, not grammar drills.
So more like creating a space where learning happens naturally.
Exactly. Could we apply that to other subjects? It's a big question.
I mean, it would revolutionize education, wouldn't it?
It would.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond just schools. Think about artificial intelligence.
Oh, yeah. AI. If we can figure out how human cognition works, can we build machines that think like us?
That's the goal, right? And Chomsky's work, it provides a framework for understanding just how complex language is, which is essential if we want to create AI that can truly understand and generate human language.
So, big implications. Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into rules and representations, what are some key takeaways you hope our listener walks away with?
Well, first, I hope they gain a sense of awe at just how amazing the human mind is. Chomsky's work reveals the intricate machinery behind even the simplest thoughts and sentences.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing when you really think about
That
it.
is. And secondly, I hope they embrace the challenge of questioning their assumptions.
Like not taking things for granted.
Exactly. Chomsky's ideas, they often go against conventional wisdom. They push us to re-examine what we believe about knowledge, learning, even reality itself.
To always be curious and keep asking why.
That's it. It's an invitation to a lifetime of learning and discovery.
So to our listener, as you continue to explore Chomsky's work, keep an open mind, embrace the mystery, and never stop questioning the world around you.
Because, like Chomsky said, the purpose of inquiry is not to know the right answers, but to question the wrong ones.
Yeah, it's like he's saying it's okay to not have all the answers.
Exactly. It's more important to keep asking questions.
To keep that sense of wonder alive.
Yeah. Exactly. And to recognize that even the simplest things, like language, are built on this incredible complexity.
It's like there's this hidden world operating beneath the surface.
And it's a world that's just waiting to be explored.
Definitely. So as we wrap up, what are you still pondering after this deep dive into rules and representations? I keep coming back to this idea that maybe we have these innate structures for more than just language.
It's a huge idea, right? Like, what if there's a universal grammar for music? Or math? Or even, like, social interactions?
Right. Like, are those just talents that some people are born with? Or is there something more fundamental going on?
It makes you rethink the whole nature versus nurture debate. How much of who we are is predetermined and how much is shaped by our experiences.
Yeah. Chomsky seems to be saying it's a bit of both.
I think so, too. Like, we might have these innate structures, these predispositions, but they need the right input to develop. It's like a seed, you know?
A seed.
Yeah, it has the potential to grow into something amazing, but it needs the right environment. It needs soil, water, sunlight.
I like that analogy. So we're all born with these incredible seeds of potential, and it's up to us and the world around us to help them grow.
Exactly. And maybe by understanding these innate structures, these seeds of knowledge, we can create better learning environments.
Environments that are more in tune with how our minds naturally work.
Exactly. Less rote learning, more focus on nurturing curiosity and critical thinking.
Like, instead of force-feeding information, we create a space where kids can explore and discover for themselves.
That's the idea. Chomsky's work really has the potential to revolutionize education.
And not just education, right? It makes you think about all sorts of things, like artificial intelligence, for example.
Oh, yeah. If we want to create AI that can truly think and learn, we need to understand the human mind.
And that's where Chomsky's work comes in.
Exactly. It gives us a roadmap. It helps us understand the complexity of human cognition.
It's like he's opened up a whole new world of possibilities.
And it all starts with questioning, with asking why.
Never stop asking why. Well, to our listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into Chomsky's rules and representations.
I hope it sparked your curiosity.
And inspired you to keep exploring.
Because there's always more to discover.
So keep those why questions coming. Who knows what amazing insights you might uncover.